Hello and welcome. I am going to talk about anatalism or non-natalism, which is the idea that every birth is a moral choice, which can be good or bad, and should be evaluated based on these circumstances. Anatalism or non-natalism is the middle ground between natalism and antinatalism. I wanted to introduce non-natalism as a formal position because I have been researching the morality of birth for several years and haven't really found anybody detailing this particular philosophical belief or idea. So my goal for now is to help other people realize that this idea exists, and I want to just introduce my personal reasons for being a non-natalist. I will not be using this video to make syllogisms or counter arguments against natalist or anti-natalist talking points, but I will be interested in doing those things later, so stay tuned if that's something that you'd be interested in. I will be using non-natalism and anatalism interchangeably, contrasted against natalism and antinatalism. As I said before, anatalism is the philosophical view that birth can be either good or bad, but it is a moral choice. Unlike antinatalism, non-natalism does not assert that life always brings net suffering. Unlike natalism, non-natalism does not assert that everyone should have biological offspring. Anatalism emphasizes that the morality of every birth is determined by circumstances. My personal anatalism manifests primarily as me being very pro-adoption. For the rest of the video, it might be useful to think of being anatalist or non-natalist and being pro-adoption as all the same thing. However, I want to be clear that non-natalism, antinatalism, or natalism deal only with the single question of whether or not it is good to biologically reproduce. Being pro-adoption or anti-adoption deals with how best to increase the well-being of the children who are here, or of the entire world. I want to use the rest of this video to discuss why I became non-natalist and how my non-natalism affects my life. There are a few things that I think put me on the path towards developing this particular idea. The first was learning about adoption. Then the second was learning about the worldwide impact of human beings. And finally, when I was older and considering raising children myself, it was really time to formalize these ideas for myself. A lot of people may disagree with this particular point, but I'm just bringing it up here because it was instrumental in me putting in a lot of research in this area. So I just want to introduce my basic thoughts on the environmental concerns, particularly of increased population. So one principle I think universally recognized in conservation efforts is to reduce your impact. And choosing not to biologically reproduce obviously follows this guideline. By not producing an offspring, you are reducing your impact on the world. By having biological offspring, you increase the number of people who require food and shelter. Of course, if no one reproduced, we would go extinct, and I'm not arguing that that is the best thing for the world either. So this is part of why that led me to being a non-natalist. Basically, as far as environmental concerns go, I see anatalism or non-natalism as being the neutral ground while continuing to do research. I'll leave a couple of basic references in the description that kind of outline my ideas, and I would love to do a future video really getting into the details of why I believe not increasing our population is beneficial to the world as a whole. Another principle that I consider more important to this discussion is maintaining the world around you. I assert that all life is worth protecting, including parts of our ecosystem that we don't fully understand. Additionally, from what I do understand, children seem particularly vital to our species and our worldwide culture. So, if maintaining the world is good and children are particularly important for human beings, it seems that helping all children should be a prime feature of our society. I don't really think it is, but I hope to contribute to this effort by adopting children and helping them have a good life. There are many things important to being a good parent, and I do not think genetics are one of them. My non-natalism stands in direct contrast to the idea that people only raise children because they are programmed to reproduce as a method for propagating gene sequences. The idea that you won't understand until you have one of your own is ridiculous. I have never seen a child in my life and thought, ew, I want to kill that kid because he's not related to me. Every single time I see a kid in public, even if they're behaving poorly, I'm like, hey, I hope that kid has a good life. I hope that kid gets all the opportunities that were offered to me and more. I hope everyone in this world, children especially, are able to live good lives. I happen to believe that all children deserve love. Withholding love from a child because it wasn't formed from my semen seems strange. I'm just not really sure. It's not something that has ever made sense to me. It doesn't seem inherently evil. It's just not a priority of mine. I do not have that desire. And I don't have a desire to have children that look like myself or like my wife. I prioritize forming a bond with a child and giving them the best life possible. That is what I want to do as a parent. I want to improve my child's life every chance I can, and that's not impacted by genetic code or phenotypic resemblances. Ultimately, I see the purpose of being a parent as increasing the well-being of children. And now this is where some anti-natalists might be in conflict. I believe lives can be improved to the point where they are not net negative. I believe that any life can be improved almost any time. The other very important part that I mentioned before is all children deserve love. Yes, all children deserve love. I don't think this is controversial or debatable, but let me know if you feel differently. I can expand on the statistical benefits of adoption later, and I will leave some sources in the description. Really, the benefits of adoption deserve a whole series of videos, and that is something that I'm very interested in making. I had a great childhood because my parents were amazing. We couldn't always afford new clothes or sometimes food, but they always provided for us, and they were open with us and loving and supportive. And I'm still finding ways that my upbringing has benefited me. It seems obvious to me that giving any child a loving, supportive, safe home will be a huge help. Just being in a stress-free environment has been shown to have a dramatic impact on mental health. And having healthy food, having opportunities to socialize, having a good support structure at home, a good, stable childhood can provide all of this. And I believe adoption will benefit me as well. I don't think everybody has to raise children. It just happens to be something that I want to do. Logically, I see it as a way to maximize my potential impact on the world. You have the ability to really instill knowledge and attitudes and techniques in a child that you're raising. So that's pretty powerful. More to the point, I see raising children and adoption in particular to be a fulfilling way to use my life. I look forward to teaching my children and talking with them. I look forward to just interacting with kids and seeing what sort of tastes they develop in art and music. That sounds really cool to me. So I understand that's not for everybody, but it is one of my ambitions that I be a worthy parent to children someday. I also see societal benefits. Helping kids should be enough, but there are economic benefits to having less people depending on public funding. And if helping a child can keep them out of jail in the future, you have also prevented those future crimes. I mean, I can revisit some of this stuff, but this is kind of tangential to my major points. I would like to discuss this more in detail in the future, but I'm going to leave it there for now. Hopefully you get my point. Helping people is good. Adoption helps people. Adoption is good. So those are the general reasons why I am an anatalist. Anatalism, non-natalism, is a position that stands in opposition to the idea that birth is always good or bad. It can be both. Anatalism is the middle ground that requires people to reflect on their personal circumstances as well as the circumstances of their community and of the world, and requires people to accept the repercussions of their choices. I am anatalist for deeply personal reasons. I'm not trying to force anybody to think the same way that I do. My anatalism can be summed up by ObjectivelyDan from Truth Wanted. It doesn't make sense for me to have kids when I have the option of adopting. So before I go, I just wanted to talk about a few areas of future interest. A major point in my mind is the apparent lack of arguments against adoption. I have discussed this with as many people as I can, and I have yet to hear any reason not to adopt. Although I should point out that I have been convinced by others that adoption would not have been a good decision for them. I also want to mention local antinatalism, a reformed version of antinatalism that is pretty close to non-natalism. You can look it up. I'll leave a link in the description. But basically, the difference here is I am not advocating for any particular group of people to go extinct based on geography or time or genetics or anything. I'm not advocating for people not to reproduce because you have bad genetic markers or something like that. I don't consider that stuff to be relevant here. Probably the single area that I will focus on most from here on out is the adoption process and adoption reform. There was a very negative bill that was passed recently. I would be interested in discussing that, and I would be interested in discussing the federal legislation regarding adoption and state by state legislation and what the differences are. And the differences between private and public adoptions. But one thing that I really want to focus on is normalizing adoption and discussing adoption more publicly. I really think we should be seeing PSAs and news articles about adoption every day. I think my goal ultimately is to make adoption just a more approachable subject for more people. I had two goals. I wanted to introduce this idea, anatalism, non-natalism, the idea that every birth can be good or bad and needs to be evaluated as a serious decision. And second, I am hoping that we could possibly start a community. I just want other people to know that this is a formal position, something that I've thought about a lot, and I really think should be discussed more openly and more consistently. And hopefully we can start a community. Yeah. So I hope everyone understands what anatalism means, at least to me. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please leave comments and suggestions for future topics or improvements. Thank you.